what happens if my AI goes wrong? As engineers, when we build systems, we have to identify failure points and make sure that we mitigate them. But you now need to ask yourself, what happens if my AI goes very right? For the first time ever, these technologies can overachieve their goal. So in our world, in marketing, there's a human bias called homophily, which is that we tend to trust and like people that look and sound like us. Now, if I optimized ads, you end up with a world potentially of you selling to you. Now, that might be very good for business, but it might be enforcing biases and bigotry and social bubbles. So you need to think about what are the consequences of our AI overachieving its goal. I think there are three things that differentiate an organization in the world of AI. The first one, we've talked about this today already, is data. If you have data that contains insights that are more useful than your competitors, then you have an advantage. Data makes AI smart. Okay? The second is talent. Now, I know that most people have rebranded themselves as AI experts over the past 3 years, but the fact is, if you want to build differentiated AI solutions, you need differentiated AI talent. People have been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. Don't kid yourself that you're going to be able to beat your competitors if you're not using differentiated AI talent. And finally, it's leadership. And I don't just mean talk, I think everybody's a leader. Leadership isn't a title given to you, it's earned. It's if you understand the transformational power of these technologies, if you can make sure that you're placing the right bets to make sure that these technologies are having the most amount of value, then you have an advantage. If your leadership are not savvy, they don't understand these things, you'll place the wrong bets and cause lots of misinvestment. I think there are a few things that are going to emerge over the coming years. So I think we're using AI to solve problems across our supply chain. There's a concept called agents that are appearing, essentially digital employees that are going to be used to augment our work. But those digital agents are going to start to enter the physical world. In the next 5 years, we're going to see robots entering the world. And there's some new emerging technology that is barely on the radar of most organizations called neuromorphics. Now, large language models, as you all know, are massively energy intensive. They require lots of data to learn. They learn very slowly. Your brains operate on the power of a light bulb. You learn incredibly quickly. You only need to see one piece of data for you to know what it is. Neuromorphics are some new emerging technologies that are modeled on how our brains work, and I think that over the coming years, understanding about how human brains work, how AIs work, means we'll have a renaissance in what's called neuromarketing. Neuromarketing is looking inside people's brains to see how they think and feel about things. And I think that's going to be an advantage for organizations if you bring that talent. Okay, so there are three types of AI risks. The first one we've talked about is how do we bring these technologies inside our organizations in a safe and responsible way? There are malicious risks. How do we prevent bad actors from creating pathogens and misinformation? But there are also macro risks, big questions that we're facing as a species over the next 5-10 years that I think most people are now thinking about, which is great. So I've captured these risks using a concept called PESTLE. You might have come across this framework before. It's a macro framework. It stands for political, environmental, social, technological, legal, and economic. And you might have all heard the word also singularity. A singularity is a point in time that you can't see beyond. And it was adopted by the AI community to refer to the technological singularity, which is where we build a brain 1 million times smarter than us. I'll come back to that later on. So I think there are 6 singularities. Very quickly, the first one is the political singularity, a post-truth world. A world where people no longer know what is true. And with misinformation bots, deepfakes have challenged our political foundations, and they continue to challenge our political foundations, but they're also now challenging the fabric of our reality. So with a few seconds of your voice, with a few images, I can now clone you, and people are using clones to commit fraud. Mark Reed, the CEO of WPP, was cloned last year. Somebody tried to use his clone to commit fraud. I actually think that our community can solve this problem, so I'm actually very hopeful. The second one is the environmental singularity. Again, we've spoken about this today. As far as I'm concerned, AI is advancing consumption, but consumption typically gives people access to goods and services that enrich their lives. And we know it's putting pressure on our planetary boundaries, but I know that if we apply algorithms, if we apply AI in the right way, we can at least half the amount of energy that we need to run this planet. And the reason why I know that is because every time I've solved a problem for Tesco Tesco or PwC or whatever, we typically reduce the amount of carbon by 25% and unlock more capacity. If you can optimize across your entire organization, you can reduce the amount of carbon even more. We could easily halve the amount of energy and still operate this planet with abundance. The social singularity is not my expertise. It's the point in time where we cure death. There are scientists that believe there are people alive today that don't have to die. AI is advancing medicine. It's able to monitor ourselves, and soon nanobots will be cleaning us out. And a bit like a car, if you stay on top of damage, that car will never, ever break down. In fact, I just signed up to a website recently called tomorrow.bio. For the price of a cappuccino a week, $5 a week, they'll freeze you if you die. So if I died now, they'll come and get me and they'll freeze me. They don't know how to unfreeze me, but the point is that for the price of a commodity, we could all potentially now cheat death. The technological singularity is when we build a brain 1,000,000 times smarter than us. Now, my community felt this wasn't going to happen for another 40 years. We think it might now happen in the next 5, 10 years, and we have no idea if this is going to be the most glorious thing that happens to us or our biggest existential threat. I'm a little bit worried about this, and actually I've just started a company. There's a spin out of WPP to try to solve machine consciousness. Machine consciousness is going to become a thing over the next several years. Happy to talk about it later on. My advice to people is that when superintelligence comes, look busy, be nice to each other, and hopefully it will bugger off to a different dimension. That's what I hope will happen. Okay, the legal singularity is when surveillance becomes ubiquitous. We're nearly done. So, we're in the business of not only understanding perception, but influencing perception. That's our explicit business. And AI is becoming really good at influencing people. And that's a very powerful position to be in. We need to make sure that we're doing it safely, responsibly. We also need to make sure we're preventing bad actors from using these technologies to accumulate more wealth and more power. The final singularity is my favorite singularity. This is about AI and jobs. So, for the past 17 years, I've been using AI to free people from mundane, repetitive tasks. Those people have not lost their jobs. They've gone on to do more important, impactful, purposeful things. And I think for the next 5 years, we're going to see a Cambrian explosion of new innovations, new opportunities. Jobs will be displaced and disrupted, but AI is like an energy source that will allow humanity to grow. Beyond 5, 10 years, I don't think anybody knows what they're talking about, okay? And just to give you the two extremes of the argument that we hear in the press, the one extreme of the argument is that when AI can free up whole jobs, it probably will. The pressure to reduce costs, increase profits, means that we'll probably free up whole jobs or stop hiring. If that happens very quickly, we might see mass technological employment, which will lead to social unrest and our economies not being able to rebalance. And I think we need to lean into that problem and think about mitigating those risks. The other side of the argument is that we should be accelerating as fast as possible towards this singularity. By removing the friction from the creation and dissemination of goods, food, healthcare, energy, transport, education, we can bring the cost of those goods down to essentially zero.